Today on Nova Legends podcast, I have Betsy Andreu, wife of Frankie Andreu, and Betsy was involved in the Lance Armstrong cases for all these years. She was recently featured on CNN's Jake Tapper States of Scandal. Um, Betsy was actually there in the operating room when the great Lance Armstrong, and we'll talk about radius, but when he confessed to taking all kinds of drugs, and Frankie, her husband, rode with Lance through the Tour de France wins and became a director sportif on the team. Later worked in media, but both Betsy and Frankie eventually had to testify against Lance. So Betsy's been involved with the Lance Armstrong matter from a very long time. Betsy, did I get most of that right?
Yeah, except for the fact it wasn't an operating room, it was a conference room at the hospital.
Okay, okay,
Okay.
great. Yeah, that would be a little bit too intimate.
Okay.
The operating room. You're right. Okay, good. So, well, anyway, good to see you. Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So, look, when I was watching you on TV on Sunday, it just occurred to me that after all these years, you're still relevant. They're still talking to you about this case. Lance has been brought down. It's been 11 or 12 years. I'm not clear whether you ever got your apology, whether he acknowledged, apologized, and made amends. I'm not sure. But we're still talking about you. Why do you think after all this time you're still relevant?
Uh, because the hospital room
Mhm.
is where he admitted to using all these performance enhancing drugs is germane to the entire story. And honestly, without the hospital room, it, and I could be wrong. I don't know if the dominoes would have fallen as they did. And uh, I guess because so many people caved to him and I didn't. And I get maybe that's why. But it's history. It's part of sports history. It is what it is. So I realize that's my 15 minutes.
Well, it's been 15 years, not 15 minutes.
Well,
But a lot of people knew Lance was doping. His teammates had to have known. They had a pretty regulated self transfusion program that was very intricate. So people knew he was doping. Me and you were early cynics of him, and I was as a fan, it just didn't make any sense to me. But no one would stand up to Lance except for it was you, it was David Walsh in the Sunday Times, it was Emma O'Reilly, who was a soigneur on the team. Occasionally, we would hear some smart aleck remarks from a rider or two, but you guys are pretty much on an island all these years. Why would And then finally Floyd Landis, who I guess felt kind of jaded because he wasn't allowed back into cycling after he got caught. But why was everyone else so afraid, and why were you guys so brave?
well, yeah, it was a series of people who came forward. So initially you can say, yeah, it was just us, but um people like Tyler told me, I saw what he did to you, and I didn't want that to happen to me. But it wasn't just cyclists who knew, a lot of people knew. I think a lot of the wives knew, maybe not to the extent uh, they knew what their husbands were doing, but so many people knew. People who were trained by somebody like Salazar, Kara Goucher. She said that she knew that there was something. Alberto Salazar told her that what he was doing with Lance. So it wasn't limited to just this inner circle. So many people knew, but they saw how ruthless he was, and who in the heck wants to get in his crosshairs? And people want to either make a living or enjoy the lifestyle they're living.
Yeah. Well, as Floyd said, if he didn't dope and ride with Postal, or it would have been somebody else. So if you wanted to ride at that
Mhm.
level, you really had no choice. So Lance,
Um,
he definitely took it to another, at least a Tour de France. I mean, there was
right.
David Moncoutier who did the 1 day races, and he was an adamant non-doper, but it's pretty much accepted by the late '90s. It was very hard to keep up. unless you're going to dope. And there was a lot of pressure on cyclists to dope on certain teams, even if they didn't. It wasn't organized. You had to keep your job. You had to try to keep up with the Peloton. So you know, from your point of view, um, there was doping all around. It wasn't just Lance. From my point of view, the reason why I had a problem with Lance, and the reason why we would chat on our anonymous daily Peloton forum, is that he took all the air out of cycling. He wouldn't allow his teammates to have any glory. Any like I remember one time Pina almost won a prologue stage. He had a hard time with that. Hiras to ride for himself. It was a big deal for him, who was a very talented rider who had won the Volta before. He had riders like Iman Mayo when he started to win some big races. He went to the authorities and tried to undermine him. So not only was he doping, he was trying to stop others from doing it. So my problem with Lance was he was taking the air out of the sport. It was no fun. The doping, I didn't like cheating, but if they're all kind of doping, it didn't really, matter as much to me. It was just the way he was ruining the sport that I had a problem with.
Well, I had a problem with the doping. And I think after the Festina scandal, 99, I truly believe the vast majority of guys were so afraid they were going to get jailed by the French authorities, and they didn't want to have to deal with that, with ruined reputations, not being welcome back to the sport. Remember, back then, I don't think there was USADA. There was no WADA for sure. So there was really no place to turn. So, but 1999, when he came back, it was his chance to say, okay, well, no, Lance came back in 98, but in 1999, when people were riding, I believe, there were a lot of people who were clean. I would say most of the Peloton, because nobody wanted to deal with getting arrested. He thought that that was a great opportunity to go ahead and do what he did, which then everybody who had a sense said, okay, something is wrong here. It's not right. Americans were truly ignorant of the sport, so they didn't understand. I remember talking to a journalist in the press room, and I think it was Sestriere, who said the European journalists were laughing and the American journalists were kind of in disbelief, but the word back home was, America loves this, we need more of it. And so with that attitude, the Europeans knew better. The Americans didn't. Maybe some of the journalists did, but it wouldn't be good for the sport of cycling. It wouldn't be good for their bottom line. So they just, I believe, went along with the lie.
So Frankie would have an opinion about this, I'm sure, that the times in the races and the speed did not diminish after 98. I think that the teams stopped with the organized doping and left the riders on their own to do it. That was a big Festina was an organized doping program. And what was the one in the mid 90s, the one the Giro, I forgot the name of that team. But anyway, I think that was organized. And I think what happened was I think the riders were left to their own devices to dope. And I think that gave Postal a big advantage because they still had the doping program. And as they started to test for EPO, the postal team the self transfusion there was no test for. So and in a lot of the countries they didn't have that capabilities to do that. So that's what I think the difference. I think people were still doping because I don't know how the times could go up, get fast. Times could go down, and the speeds could get faster if they had stopped. But anyway, but there's so many. Doping is part of cycling. With Fausto Coppi talked about it. Even in the rain, there's always been rumors of him. He's such a gentleman, and we love him. But there's always rumors, and Lamond would say things about the Peloton at the time. So I did feel like doping just changed and it didn't stop. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
I can't speak about other teams. I think it was pretty organized if you read Tyler's book. But I mean, Lance had what other people had, which is and in with the UCI and with Hein Verbruggen and Pat McQuaid. Other riders didn't have that. They left his team. They got popped. So they didn't have the Victor Conti of cycling, Michele Ferrari. And you had to have a lot of money to give that guy, but he knew how to dope and how to do it well. So, but there is the turning point, I think, and I really don't know because Lance has never told the entire truth of his doping program, is that because Frankie never did a blood transfusion, he was limited to on his EPO, which he took at first when he was 29 years old. So he spent the vast majority of his career clean, never partook in the transfusions. And I think if you look at the USADA report, everybody but one guy took part in the blood transfusions. As for the times, on Lance's team, that is, as for the times getting faster, the one to talk to about that would be Greg, because he knows physiology. He can tell you about cadence, VO2 max, all that kind of stuff. Doping in cycling is like cheating in any other way of life, whether it be academia, business, religion, unfortunately, or other sports, baseball, football. You're always going to have somebody who's going to try to buck the system. It's part of life. Mm-hmm. You're never going to get rid of it. You're never going to get rid of sin. It's with us.
Yeah. Well, I know Lance affected you personally, so you had every reason to feel the way you did about him. How did you feel about the other riders that you knew were doping as well, like Hamilton, who did well, some of the guys who really took off? A lot of guys just kind of went along. What were your feelings to them for going along and doing the doping after Frankie stopped?
They did what they did. I mean,
were you friends with them? Did you have relationships with the other riders and their wives?
Well, yeah, yes. But then when the whole thing started to crumble, I was persona non grata. So people that I thought were really close friends of mine were no friends at all. And everybody, they would turn me in for 2 coins. And they just didn't care. It was money for them. And I think it also went beyond paying a mortgage to living the lifestyle they were living. And that if they can live with themselves, then they live with themselves. I have kept in touch with Tyler, who generally is a very, very, very nice guy, but nobody wanted to be associated with me. And like somebody had said on my Facebook page, they were never friends to begin with. So it's better that they're out of my life. I wish them well. And I really, truly, I don't even wish that something happens to their children with what they did with me, because it would be crushing and devastating. And you have to be a very strong person to live with that.
Yeah. Well, this may also be a question for Greg LeMond, but have you ever worked out in your mind how important doping is to Lance? Like, would he have been a great cyclist? I mean, if they're all doping, does it matter?
No, but they're not. But see, I truly, to say everybody is doping is doing a disservice to the people who are not doping. And it's like drugs affect everybody differently. What maybe EPO will do wonders for me, but won't do wonders for you. And then you have guys who will, I think it was Lance or Tyler said he was willing to do the whole kit and caboodle, where Lance was like, okay, Tyler, put the brakes on it. So
easy, big fella.
There's never going to be a level playing field because the drugs affect everybody differently. And then what kind of drugs and who's going to administer them and blah, blah, blah. The only level playing field would be as everybody had the in with the UCI that Lance had. That's the only level playing field, because in my opinion, there was so much corruption there.
Yeah. And it was horrible what the things, again, they were investigating his competitors. And I'm just like, what are you doing? And what they did to Mayo and then Pantani, and, they shouldn't have been doping, or whatever,
Right.
but it just, they weren't treated the same way. And I think when you do that,
No.
it causes a lot of cynicism in the game. Have you ever talked to Lamont about whether or not when he rode, if he felt like the Peloton was doped when he was going against Eno or riding with Eno? However you
Yeah.
look at it. Or did he? What was the other guys? The long hair, long Fignon. Those
You know,
those great characters of those days. Did he ever tell you whether those guys were doping as well?
I don't want to speak for Greg, but I think it's been pretty public. He realized when EPO was introduced into the Peloton, it became a game changer.
Yeah.
And that's when he said, okay, maybe I'm gonna leave the sport.
Yeah, it was very painful to watch his last year or so. We watch him climb off the bike. Well, so when you're interviewed on the 30 for 30 special in ESPN, and when Lance met Kristen Armstrong, forgot her maiden name, he asked you, "What do you think?" And you said something like, "Well, if she can put up with you, she's got my blessing," or something of that nature. So you must have had some good times with Lance as well, if he trusted you to ask you that. And also, you were in the hospital when he was going through the tough time, and he was friends with Frankie. Talk about some of the good times you may have had with Lance.
Well, when I met Kristen, I thought she was very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And what I said to him is, what is she doing with you? She's too nice and she's Catholic. So I'm not seeing the connection here, because he didn't want anybody who believed in God. And I just thought she was nice and sophisticated for him. But I mean, there were other girlfriends that I met that I liked of his as well. But Kristen she was different. But I did have a good time. There were some fun times with Lance because we would make fun of Frankie being so cheap, for example. And there were some times where Frankie would want to go to sleep and I'd stay out with Lance and we would just talk and have a good time. He met my mom, who made a Slovak pastry for him that I took to when I lived in Nice. We did a lot of stuff together, and yeah, he's high energy. He was a lot of fun to be with.
So you talked about his relationship with Frankie, that Frankie could get away with things with Lance others couldn't. He can kind of stand up to him and tease him back. He can take his stuff, and Lance would accept it from Frankie and not from anybody else. Talk about their relationship and why Lance was so patient with Frankie.
So was it Lance that termed the coin Ajax, which is abrasive, and gave it to Frankie, and coined the term Cranky Frankie, which we still use, Cranky Frankie. So Frankie's 5 years older than Lance. So Frankie had been riding, and Lance was a new up and comer, and is that the right word? Up and comer. Yeah. And so they just hit it off. They were friends, and Frankie would go and he'd stay with Lance and train with him because you can't train in Michigan in the wintertime. So when it was winter, he would go and train with Lance, and they got an apartment together in Como and just rode together and hung out. But Frankie is very curt, very to the point. I say Frankie has a 10-yard or an aura that says you're 10 yards too close, where I have an aura, you're 10 feet too far away. So Frankie could tell Lance no, and Lance wouldn't get mad. I say as time went on and Lance got bigger, it wasn't enough that you didn't just disagree with Lance or or tell him no. You had to honor the ground that he walked on. And Frankie absolutely 100% is not like that with anybody.
Mm.
And so he could tell him what he thought and you wouldn't have to worry. And I truly, truly believe that Frankie was probably one of the only true friends Lance had, because Frankie just cared for him as a person, not what he could get out of being friends with him.
What is it's interesting. What is it relationship with like George Hincapie be the same, or is it just because George is useful to Lance, so Lance would be friends with him because George is a tremendous bike rider?
I don't know. Birds of a feather flock together. That's for George.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay. So now, Lance's personality was different. So Greg, so I followed cycling when Greg LeMond was riding, but cycling was a niche sport. It was hard to find it on
Yeah.
TV. And this is before cable coverage and everything. So I'd read about Lance, and maybe there'd be a segment on Wild World of Sports or something, but it was really hard to watch what he was doing. But I loved Greg LeMond. I rode his bikes for years. And Andy Hampstead was kind of a hipster dude,
Mhm.
just kind of a cool guy. Cyclists were kind of like these cool, kind of alternative lifestyle guys. Lance kind of brought the ugly American to cycling, and it actually kind of Americanizes the sport. Do you think there were some good? Did Lance have some good effects on cycling, and that he brought cycling to the mainstream? Will you concede that there were some good in Lance in cycling?
Oh, yeah, he did. I mean, cycling grew in huge popularity because of him. But then when the downfall happened, look at the sport of cycling today.
Oh,
Is that the Lance effect? Is that because of the Lance effect? I think it has part to do with it. But he did. He brought it to the forefront, and it was the story. It wasn't just the sport of cycling, it was the story, because I'm sure a lot of people who were all rah rah about the Tour de France and Lance don't even know what the sport of cycling entails. I mean, I had no idea. All I knew about cycling was that Greg LeMond won the tour. And when I had first met Frankie, because one of my cousins was a huge cycling fan and had talked about Greg LeMond, had the Sports Illustrated when Greg was on the cover. And so I remember when I first met Frankie, one of the questions I asked him is, "Do you know Greg LeMond?" So, yeah.
yeah. Well, it it's I probably my love for cycling probably ratcheted up because of Lance, even though I always rooted against him. I was always hopeful that they would stop him from winning. But he did have an effect, and it's one of these. Sometimes you need that arch rival, the guy you want to beat, even if you don't like them. It makes things more interesting. That's leaving doping aside. So if you weren't a rider yourself, I figure you must have grown up in the sport. How did you and Frankie meet?
At Buddy's Pizza, which is um, a pizza place that was started in Detroit, and they're known for the Detroit pizza, which I have to say is pretty darn good.
Mhm.
Um, and so I met him there. He had come home after doing Paris-Roubaix, and that year in 1994, he finished ninth, and it was April 23rd. So April 23rd, I will have met him 31 years ago
Wow.
to that date. And so that's how I met Frankie. But his dad is the one who got him into cycling,
Hmm.
because I see your Cuba book in the back there, and his dad is from
Oh,
Cuba.
is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so his dad, the joke is he's the Cuban champion of everything, because we can't go to Cuba and verify anything. So he'll say he's the Cuban champion of cycling, the Cuban champion of swimming. And so his dad got him into cycling. And then actually his sisters were a heck of a lot better than he was,
Wow.
did really, really well. They were winning everything when Frankie wasn't winning anything. And it wasn't until Frankie was 17 when he won his first national championship race.
Wow.
So I had no idea, but anyways, I'm digressing.
Yeah, and but had you ever been to a bike race? Did you know anything about like what Paris-Roubaix was or anything? But
I just knew the Tour de France because of Greg and because of my cousin. And
yeah.
because Greg was basically a household name.
Mhm.
I grew up in a family, a hockey family. So my brothers played hockey, and I grew up loving the Detroit Red Wings, going to Detroit baseball Tiger games all the time. Swimming and tennis were my sports when I was in school. I will say I was the second I played second base on an all boys team in grade school. So I'm going to
Wow.
tip my hat to that. But
Yeah.
it was grade school, but
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
But, anyways,
So even as a kid, you were always very tough.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
I think. Well,
Yeah.
I have two brothers.
Right.
So, you
Well,
know,
how did you, I mean, Frankie has this very strange lifestyle. He watches what he eats. He trains for like
not
8 hours.
anymore.
Exactly. Oh, okay. But it must have been like really strange dating and then married to a cyclist because I was a cat free racer and I spend all my time on my bike, fixing my bike, thinking about food. I mean, you're just completely obsessed. I can only imagine what it'd be like to be married to a cyclist, a professional cyclist.
Not now. That is not an issue. He yells at me for it's my fault that he doesn't control his willpower and appetite.
Yeah.
But back then, oh my gosh, he was assiduous with what he ate. It was crazy. I mean, like I think he's 6'3". I think his lowest was 162 after the tour, after Perry Roubaix.
6'3", 162. My
He was a
goodness.
twig. He was a twig. Yeah. He was a
Yeah.
twig.
Wow.
So, but we ate a lot of pasta,
Mhm.
definitely. And that's fine with me. So, but he did. He really watched what he ate a
Yeah.
lot.
How about the danger of the sport? I mean, how did you feel when you're
Ugh.
watching him descend down the Alps on a cloudy day? It must have been horrible to watch.
It really, it really hit home after Fabio Casartelli died.
Mhm.
And because it really never, I mean, his grandma, his abuela would talk about the dangers of it. And even now, I mean, with everybody on their flipping cell phones, I just pray that he's okay. Yeah, it's nerve wracking.
Yeah, well, I remember when Carcatelli died, or you almost wonder why it doesn't happen more because these guys they're riding so close together. Yeah, this morning I was just thinking about that time I was in a race where we were descending at 60 miles an hour. One bad move, but they do this all the time, and I can only imagine, it might not even be his fault, and someone takes a bad corner, and then you're over a cliff or something like that, and I can only imagine what it would be like to be married to him. But I guess after a while you got used to it.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm a worry ward. I worry when he goes out on the roads in Detroit.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Does he still ride?
Oh yeah,
Oh, he
yeah.
does?
Except now he's become soft, so he won't ride if it's cold outside.
Or rainy or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, well, look, Frankie retires from the sport, and they offer him a job to work for Postal, which I'm sure was great because Frankie's very good on TV, but at the time he probably wondered, what is he going to do with his life if he's not going to ride?
Yeah.
How did you enjoy that lifestyle when Frankie's more in support of the team? Was that a better way to live?
Well, he didn't want to end. He didn't want it to end when it ended.
Mhm.
But it's a casualty when your wife has a big mouth. So I was a liability for him. As far as the lifestyle, we had our first in 1999. Frankie's career ended after 2000, and then we had a baby in 2001, 2002. So going back and forth it became a hassle. And then, once your kids are in school, there was talk of maybe we would go to Belgium and live for a couple years if something panned out. And he really didn't want to do it. And I kind of wanted to, but I didn't want to because I did like going back and forth. It would be 3 months in Europe, 3 months here, 3 months in Europe, 3 months here for the year. And so I grew to like that. And I like the difference in the cultures. And, but I feel bad it didn't end for him the way he wanted to go out in the sport. But when they brought him back, we knew why they brought him back. It's because I was considered an enemy, and it was smart of them. Keep your enemies close, because the chances of me talking, ruining it for Frankie, who was working for the team, it wouldn't have been very smart, right?
Yeah.
So it was smart of them to hire him back. I wasn't happy with it, but we had a baby on the way, just bought another house, and he took the job.
Yeah. Well, did he miss the highs? I mean, to win the Tour de France must have been an amazing experience for him. And I don't know how you felt about it because you already knew about the doping at the time. At least the team was doping.
Uh-huh.
Did he miss those highs? And how did you feel about not experiencing those highs anymore?
Well, now Frankie has as many Tour de France wins as Lance. So that's
Yeah.
great. He missed racing. He does not miss training at
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
at all. But I mean, he liked it. He got to know the guys, and there's a camaraderie there. And yeah, so like I said, he missed the training. No, he missed the racing, didn't miss the training.
Yeah. So Betsy, when we first met, we both thought, I thought no matter Lance would never get caught. I'm like, if they don't know what's going on. I remember there, I was so they wouldn't publish LA Confidential, David Walsh's book in English. I guess he
Yep.
wanted an injunction, even though I guess snippets had been reported in the American newspapers. But I really thought, and I'm sure you did too, that this was never going to end, and Lance was going to ride off into the sunset, and nothing would ever come of this. Did you feel that way as well? That we were just kind of barking at the moon, people like me and you?
Well, so I think it's interesting. Uh, did we meet on cycling news forums, or was it daily Peloton forums and then it became cycling news forums?
I believe it's close. I think Daily Peloton, but I'm not sure. That's a good question.
So I went on there as myself because it was very cathartic for me, because I was getting decimated. People said I was lying. They were talking bad about me because at that time my name was already thrown in as being part privy to this hospital room conversation with the doctors. And so I found a little bit of solace, and I was given hope when people in that forum, which was just for people who were really interested in cycling, supported me. And you were one of them. And you went by the name Smug, and I liked your snark, and I thought you were funny. And I
Thank
would
you.
like reading what you had to say. And I did like the support, because I was just being, the more that time went on, the more that I was just being beaten and hammered down. So even just to have this support was really, really good. Now I forgot, what was the question? Sorry.
No, God, maybe, maybe I forgot it too. But I guess we're talking about how we met, and oh yeah, whether or not we'd ever thought the day would come when.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So um in the back of my mind,
Mhm.
I honestly, truly, a part of me thought he's never going to get caught now. One day he will get caught. One day something will happen where it'll come crumbling down. But I truly didn't think it would be until at least 20 years after. So I thought, honestly, I was thinking maybe 20, 2030.
Mhm.
That's the time frame I had in my mind. And I thought somebody would say something then. And so, but I never imagined it would unfold the way it did. Never, 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 never.
Wow. Was it weird after he sat on Oprah's couch and admitted it? I mean,
Partially. He partially admitted. He didn't admit everything.
he admitted everything, but
No.
it's pretty accepted that he doped, and yeah, he's very careful on some of the things that he says. But it's clear that you're right, and it's clear that you've been vindicated. Um, isn't it? Wasn't it kind of weird? It was like for me we always said, as a black person, you always said could never be a black president. And after Obama won president, it was weird because we couldn't really complain about that anymore. It was like, there's a black president now. It was always a weird to say after. It was a great thing, but it was a strange thing. How about you? I remember thinking after Lance admitted it, I'm like, I never thought this day would come. And it was actually weird. Because I remember when I used to talk about Lance with people, everyone would be like, that guy's saving souls from cancer. And you have the nerve to criticize him. So, but then when that day came and everyone, kind of piled on in some regard.
Yeah. So I remember in the fall being contacted by some journalists, and they said he's going to do a tour. There's going to be a tell-all. And I was very skeptical. And he did admit that he doped, but he did not admit everything. He did not admit everything. There's still so many questions, and it's not a matter of, oh, you can't get beyond that. It's a matter of history. Well, who knew what? What exactly was your doping regimen? And he will never admit the hospital room until, if he comes to Jesus truly, then he'll admit it. If he doesn't, he's never going to admit the hospital room happened, because he can't give it to me. But it was Frankie, it was a big wow that he had said yes to Oprah's initial questions about doping. And to me, it wasn't enough at all in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
When he came out of retirement, though, did you, like me, think that's a foolish move?
No, I didn't. I remember I was complaining to David Walsh and to Nate Vinton of the New York Daily News. Mm-hmm. And I remember David said, Betsy, don't be so daft. This is how he's going to get caught. And Nate Vinton said the same exact thing. And I said, he's never going to get caught. Yeah, boy, was I wrong. I didn't think he would get caught that way. I
just thought it gave him more opportunity to fail a drug test. There was just more opportunities. If he's gone out of mind, why dig some old stuff up? You're more likely to try to dig stuff up if he's still winning titles, making money, depriving opportunities to other riders. So I just thought he really exposed himself when he did that. I mean, and I admit it was interesting when he came out of retirement, but then he was still making a fool of himself. At least in my eye, he was horrible to Contador, who was obviously the new star in the game. He tried to undermine him. And he was the same old Lance, but in a way, it was must see TV. So we're watching the Tour de France again.
Well, he likes the spotlight, and there comes a time every athlete is going to have to retire. I mean, everybody, So he just, I don't. If he actually thought he was going to win again, that was just stupid.
Hey, he got third. He wasn't that far away.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, what about his relationship with cancer? So, one thing that I never liked, he obviously used cancer as a shield, and you have to respect, the way he overcame cancer, the way he inspired others who've had cancer. How his gold bracelets and Livestrong, it did good work. So there was a lot of good in Lance with cancer, but there was another side of it that I felt, he exploited it a little bit as well. What was your feelings about the relationship between Lance and cancer?
Well, he was blessed to have overcome it. Mm-hmm. Some people have wondered if he did have cancer. I saw the x-rays. He did have cancer, and he overcame it. He gave people hope 100%. And some of those, it does beg the question, Is false hope better than no hope at all? He did overcome it. It was just, it defies, I can't understand why somebody who had cancer, and think you can make the argument that all of his doping beforehand possibly contributed to the cancer that he did have.
Mhm.
Why would he go and dope again? I mean, it's insane.
Mhm.
It is, it's insane. I don't, I can't, I don't understand.
You want me to give
I
my
just,
opinion of that? I felt that because since you already faced death once, he's like, I'm pretty indestructible. That's how I saw it. But maybe I'm wrong.
no, you know what? I think that's a pretty, yeah, I think you're onto something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but
But,
anyway, go ahead.
Bill Gifford in January 2012 came out with an article in Outside Magazine. It's not about the lab rats. You can still find it online today. He did his due diligence and his research into Livestrong. They like to say, and they would use, and even to this day, and I don't know what they do now, but when Lance was at Livestrong or Lance Armstrong Foundation, whatever, they would say it's all about cancer research. They gave very, very, very little money to cancer research. Very little money to cancer research. And from what CNN's reporting, from the woman who works at the foundation now, it sounds like she said, I think that there was a divorce with Armstrong,
Mhm.
but they want an annulment. They want to pretend it never even happened, that
Mhm.
he didn't have anything to do with it. Livestrong made me extremely skeptical of donating a cent to any charity at all. It made me very, very skeptical because of some of what I saw, especially because of Bill Gifford's piece, which I thought was really, really good. Um, I'm sure they've cleaned up their act. Um, but in my opinion, uh, I don't know. I think of Mother Teresa when she says, when you do something, have the intention of love behind it. And I think as far as starting Livestrong, the intention, from what I know, it wasn't pure love. So,
Well, it was obvious there was a complicated agenda behind it. Betsy, you're one of the most famous sports spouses. Well, I don't want to say of all time, but that's huge. But you're,
no, I think Giselle Bundchen is a little bit more famous than me.
yeah, but you are really. I mean, I can't name that many cycling wives of pro cyclists. I can't. I know Greg LeMond's wife. I can't think of her name.
Kathy.
Yeah, Kathy. I'm
Kathy.
sorry if she's watching, but she was great, and she was always at the races with his dad. It was awesome. But generally, you don't see the spouses very often unless they're their Instagram account and they got like glamour shots on there or something. You made a name for yourself, and your name is as big as Frankie. What do you think your life would have been like if Frankie never met Lance or Lance never existed? What do you think you would have been doing all these years?
Well, I would have had a lot more time to spend with my kids, which I'm a stay-at-home mom. So I did spend time with them, but it got to the point where our oldest thought I worked for USADA. He wanted me to go into career day in 8th grade. And I said, Frankie, I asked him, I said, why? I'm a stay-at-home mom. He said, no, you don't. You work for USADA. You talk to Travis all the time. I had to tell him, I don't work for USADA, Frankie. So it would have been, there wouldn't have been a lot of stress. I can tell you that right now. Um, but I don't know. It's hard to play the what if game. Who knows?
But
I don't.
have you enjoyed, and I know you've had some tough times with it as well, but have you enjoyed making a difference though, being able to take on doping? I mean, obviously you didn't do it by yourself. There's a lot of people that really helped to try to clean up cycling. I'm sure it's an ongoing process, but you had an impact. When you look back, are you proud that you've had that impact on cycling? Because even if Lance didn't exist, there would have still been doping.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's hard to say, did I enjoy it? Because I was getting flippin' decimated. Are you kidding me? That was not enjoyable at
No, I
all.
said enjoy looking back on the impact that you've had. How about that?
On the well, I don't think it was as drastic as it should have been because I don't because I think that I don't even really know where the sport is as far as impact goes. The greatest impact I have are to my children, um, to myself, really, my marriage. If I can give people a shimmer of hope to do the right thing, to speak up, to tell the truth, then I'm happy.
Mhm.
So it doesn't have to necessarily pertain to cycling.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also it was part of it that if not for doping, Frankie may have had a longer career, and it took the career away from a lot of cyclists.
Well, how many people, we don't know the names of people who never made it in
Yeah.
the European Peloton because they didn't dope, or the clean guys who finished at the very, very tail end of some of these races. We don't know their names.
Yeah. These guys that were around Lance and also Frankie, like Tyler and it was McCarthy, was it Kevin McCarthy? What was his name? And all these guys he rode with, Bobby Jolik, he's been
Uh-huh.
on the special. Some of these guys you see, but whatever happened to all these guys? Did they land on their feet? Were they able to put their lives back together?
I don't know. I don't talk to any of them. Now, Tyler, once in a while.
Mhm.
I did talk to Floyd until, in my opinion, Floyd didn't need my help anymore. Just he wouldn't. I don't talk to him at all. Tyler, once in a while, um, keep in touch with, but that's about it. I don't know what any of these other guys really are doing with their lives.
Did you and Floyd have a falling out for some reason?
No, mm-mm. He
What do
just
you mean? Yeah. He's an
no.
amazing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I thought his story was amazing because he's a Mennonite, and I remember before the downfall, when Floyd first came onto the scene, because I like talking about religion, and very intrigued with the Amish and the Mennonites, and I asked Frankie, can you put me in touch with this guy Floyd so I could just ask him about his religion? And he said no. So Floyd was just weird. He would come and he would go. He would answer emails. He wouldn't answer emails. He would answer phone calls. He wouldn't answer phone calls. And then it's just like, I guess once the whistleblower case was completely done and that chapter was closed, um, that's it. I'd have a question and then he just would never answer me. So I haven't talked to him in years.
That's too bad. I've really enjoyed listening to Floyd. He's definitely has a certain energy about him.
Mm-hmm.
He's something about it. He's very easy to listen to. He makes you want to cheer for him. I thought he was a great cyclist. I enjoyed watching him ride. So Betsy, I live outside of DC, and a lot of our road races that if you race in this area or in Mennonite country where Floyd is from. So I used to do those races, after I
There are a
was.
lot of Mennonites outside of DC.
Yeah, so it's in Pennsylvania, but it's less than a 2 hour drive. It's right across the border north of Baltimore. That area is Mennonite country.
Okay.
So I used to go out there and do road races, and there there's not a whole lot of black people were riding back then, racing back then, especially. So I remember one day I had finished like maybe I finished top 10 in a crit. I was a pretty good in a road race. I was a pretty good rider, and I was just sitting there, and after the race, this boy came up to me. He was Mennonite, and he said, you did a lot better in that race last year. I'm like, well, how do you remember me? I'm like, well, we watched all these races. And this is what we do. We come out and we watch. I remember you, and
Wow.
you did better last year. I'm like, well, thanks for reminding me. Uh, yeah. So, um, yeah. So Floyd is somebody I know. He's had a restaurant business, a restaurant. I'm not sure how that did. I know he tried to have a team, and I don't know how that did. I just hope that the guys that didn't make it in cycling, and a lot of it, some of it was because of Lance. I hope they did okay. What about other sports? Now, you know, no one ever talked about Bobby Bonds, his wife, or anyone else.
Jerry Bonds.
I was saying, I'm sorry, Barry Bonds. Bobby was his dad.
Okay.
Barry Bonds, well, the Balco scandal, which was a lot of the folks that worked
Mhm.
on cycling also worked on the Balco, the steroid scandal. And, there was never any wives that showed up. It was always about testing. It was always about, um, doing things. People looked much different, like Barry Bonds. It's fun. It's interesting that you were someone who had an impact and you weren't a cyclist yourself. And in all these other cases, it doesn't really come down to third parties very often.
No, but I mean, a lot of these women, they like their lifestyle.
Yeah.
They like the lifestyle. I valued my marriage more than I did money.
Mhm.
So there's a difference there.
Yeah. Did Frankie ever get like impatient with you? Like, bet you're
Are
killing
you kidding? He is the most impatient person, but he's really, really, really funny at making fun of me. And yeah, we're night and day on so many things. And it's funny because I asked him, if there's one thing you could change about me, what would it be?
me.
And he said, make you on time.
Mhm.
And I was shocked. I wasn't shocked at that answer. But I asked him, what else? He said, that's it.
Mhm.
So I listed off all these other things, and he said, no, just for you to be on time. I said, okay, I'll put my list away on you.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 That's good. Hey, were your kids cyclists?
No, they
Uh,
did. They did kids races when they were younger, but that's it. One time, so little Frankie, he's the oldest, and so he was more attuned with what was going on with this whole land stuff. Well, when he was in seventh grade, he said, I want to be a pro cyclist like dad. So we went to Ann Arbor, which is about a half hour away, because there's it can be hilly over there. Where over here outside of Detroit, it's just flat. So he went with Frankie and a group of riders, and it was a slow ride. And he came back, and this kid is 7, and he's an absolute twig. And he was parched, and there was white all over his mouth. And I asked him, I said, how did it go? And he said, I don't want to be a cyclist anymore.
yeah.
So he grew up playing hockey. Our daughter, soccer, and our younger son, soccer and wrestling. He was a wrestler.
Mm. Yeah.
No cycling.
Are you and Frankie recognized when you walk around? Do you get celebrity treatment?
Oh, please. Oh, gosh. No. I mean, if it's at a cycling event or if it's after, I mean, I would say like, no, not at all. If it's after something like the Oprah thing, then, some people who have watched it recognize us, but it was, yeah, not many at all.
How many times a year are you recognized if you're walking around?
Oh, please. Now, not at all.
Not once.
Mm-mm. Yeah, now?
Yeah,
No.
that's interesting.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Well, look, what are some of do you have any other goals? Would you ever want to be involved in cycling in any way, or do you think your involvement in cycling ends here?
I think you're onto something. I think it ends there. I think
Yeah.
it ends there. Um, I told our son, I would like to take the oldest son. I would one day love for all of us to go to a classic in Belgium
Mm.
Paris-Roubaix maybe, and go and see, follow the race at different parts, and for them to see where Frankie lived, and go to Como, go to Nice. And I have to say, I do like the classics. I do like watching Paris-Roubaix and Milan San Remo. And it's exciting, especially when you get there and you follow the race. It's I think it's really exciting. So I guess that's what I hope to do one day with Frankie in tow. We'll bring him along too.
Yeah, Amy and I, we went to the World Championships in 2002. I think the one Cipollini won in Belgium.
Where was that? Belgium?
It was in Hasselt, Belgium. So,
Okay.
it's kind of like Eastern Belgium. It was amazing because the good thing about the World Championship is they go around 6 or 7 times. You can kind of move around a little bit and see
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Just the feeling there, it was great. We actually met a young Chris Horner on the train. He didn't make the team that year, but he was just going to watch. So we really had a really memorable time. I still have photos from that. So yeah, that does sound like a great thing to do with the you know,
But it says now they have jobs, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Betsy, in the movie of Lance Armstrong's life, who would you want to play you?
Me. Who else could play me but me?
Would you
No. Oh gosh. Who knows? I don't know. I have no idea.
I think you'd have a role in that movie. I think you'd
Just
be
a little Botox. I wouldn't do Botox though. We'd have to put tape for the wrinkles.
Oh,
Dye the hair. Yeah.
no, you look great. Well, look, Betsy, this has been great. I've been trying to get you to talk to me for a very long
I
time.
know. I know.
And then when I saw you on TV, I'm like, well, there's no excuses now. You're out there telling your story to everybody. What about your old pal here? So
Well, I know, smug.
yeah.
I owe you one because I'm grateful that you believed. Well, yeah, why did you believe me? Why did you believe me? Because
Well,
there were a lot of people out there who didn't believe me. Why did you believe me?
I believed you because it just didn't make sense that this is a guy that was a one day race
Yeah.
star, but he hadn't even been close in any kind of a grand tour. He couldn't even keep up at a mountain stage. So all of a sudden, to get fourth in the Volta and well, Volt, I can't say that word. Yes, Tour Spain in '98, and then the things he did, it just didn't make sense. And then just the behavior, the way they were covering things up. There was another scandal that we forgot about. Remember, they found somebody on tape. They were delivering some blood in the Alps, and they tracked this guy. There was a whole bunch of stuff that was coming out, and it just pointed to the fact this wasn't real. And then, the way he bullied people. So I believed you because I found you very credible, and you had
But you
detail.
believe, but this was like before stuff really even started hitting the news. Before you must have followed cycling big time to realize because mainstream hadn't caught on to anything yet.
Well, and if they had caught on, they wouldn't say a word about it because Lance controlled the media as well. So no one ever mentioned it, probably 2003 on the telecast. I mean, Phil Liggett would talk about it a little bit
Ugh.
with Paul Sherman, like about Festina, but never about the Americans and like
Oh,
Bob
never.
Roll. And they would never, and it was pretty pitiful in that regard.
Well, they're
But it
still
just
puppets. They're still puppets. Look
well,
who's
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no. That I mean, look who's on during the Tour de France. The people who supported Lance.
Yeah, and I really liked Phil Liggett. And I remember there were things that they said that they hinted around to it, but I felt like they couldn't say anything to American audiences, and even if they felt that way. But I thought it was an unfair playing field, and I was let me get rid of this, and I was tired of it. And when you were saying the things that you were said, and a lot of them it had been written about. So it came before. And then when I met you, I was fascinated to meet you. And then you had some conversation you wanted to discuss with me. I forgot what it was, but you had more than just the Lance's confession in the conference room. You had other stuff that people had said about him that was very compelling that never was released. I had forgotten about that, but my wife reminded me. Says, you and Betsy talked about other stuff, and I can't remember what it was. Do we want to talk about it here, or is that died
No,
with?
we can, but I can't honestly. I can't remember. I can't remember the
I,
conversation we had.
this could be wrong, but I think you had an audio tape of Greg LeMond talking about Lance, and it couldn't be possible, or something like that nature.
No, Greg had they had taped me because they didn't know if they could trust me.
Oh, that's what it was. And you sent me the
So,
tape. I have that tape.
wait,
You
yeah,
sent me an audio tape. You sent me a cassette tape of a conversation. I listened to it, but I don't remember what it was.
I don't. I don't know. I don't think it was that because they taped me. I didn't tape him.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't. Yeah.
It was something because you
Or
got
maybe
my.
it was after they realized that I was legit and I was truthful. They sent, I remember they sent me a copy and I probably sent it to you. That's
Exactly.
what it was.
Yeah, yeah. It was. Again, I didn't need to be convinced. It was so obvious, and
Right.
I really felt devastated because what happened to Pantani, and he ended up killing himself. They threw the book at certain people, and even in the CNN special, Floyd was supposed to be the fall guy, and you're supposed to accept your role. And Pantani was one, and there were others. And the way they treated Simeone, it was just awful what was going on. And I love what you were saying. You gave me hope, and I think if there'd been more people that had the courage that you had, and maybe it wouldn't have lasted so long.
Well, let me just go back to a couple things. Liggett and Sherwin could have talked about Lance, but then the gravy train would have run dry.
Exactly.
So they didn't. And getting back to Cyclist, Floyd is a gifted, Floyd is gifted. He would have done, I think, a clean Floyd against a clean Lance. He would kill Lance. No question at all. No question at all.
Yeah.
I just thought of that.
No, there's something very special about Floyd, and I mean, I think Lance definitely was talented as a one-day guy, and
Yeah.
he did
Yeah.
lose the weight, and he was. I mean, he has the ability to endure pain, which is great for
And he has the ability to inflict pain. But
inflict.
anyway,
Yeah, exactly. But I said you commented on something I said on a Facebook message that I was mesmerized by that whole time period. And I thought about nothing but cycling. I'd watch the races over and over again. This whole thing was mesmerizing. And for you, it was painful because it was affecting your livelihood and you were being called things that you weren't. It was people were attacking you and stuff. And that's not fun. For me, the whole thing was a puzzle. Like, what is going on here? What are your thoughts about David Walsh? What did you ever think about him and his courage?
well, I am forever grateful to him because he was put through the ringer as well. And so he just kept going forward and plugging on and on and on. And so it shows the power of the media. And David is ethical and he's moral. And I needed that because you can only have somebody who is ethical be on the side of truth. And David was undeterred. So he was treated like garbage by many in the media as well,
Mhm.
which is just disgusting. But there's so, I mean, I just, I'm forever grateful to the troll. I'm forever grateful. I love the guy,
True. Yeah. What about the guys like Jonathan Balters, the
but
guys that's Barney Reese, the guys that obviously doped, but it never seemed to affect their career at all. Like Frankie definitely took a hit, but he was able to overcome it. And I
yeah,
don't think Lance wished Frankie, for some reason, he had a soft spot for Frankie, even though Frankie testified, he couldn't help
about
himself to some regard. But
I
but
see.
other guys were Teflon, and the Christian Vanderbilt. I'm not wishing them bad, but
Yeah.
their career never was even interrupted, it seems, by it. Why do
Yeah.
you think that is?
So I understand for first of all, let me just go back because I said I only talked to Tyler Hamilton. Once in a blue moon, I'll talk to Jonathan Vaughters, JV. I mean, I haven't talked to him in years, but I consider him to be a good guy. He's a decent person. He and Tyler are decent people. But with regard to JV and the other guys, you said taking a hit, right? They didn't take
Well,
a hit.
they didn't. They really didn't. They had great post cycling careers. They worked in like Johnny Reese was a very
Oh,
successful director sportif at CSC and others, Phonak maybe.
yeah,
Anyway, they didn't seem to be bothered by all the scandals that were going on, and some of them didn't never really confess. I don't think Reese ever
yeah.
confessed.
I mean, it's on them. I don't. Yeah, yeah. I I don't know.
Yeah, because like Frankie confessed, and he went against kind of the omerta, and
Kinda.
yeah, he did. And he had a wife that would not stop talking about it. And he still did well. People still liked him. For some reason, he was able to still work in the industry. It must
Well, it might seem that way because he's working, but he was told no a lot. I mean, his TV career came to an end when, at some point, when we call him an you were either an FOF, a friend of Frankie, or an FOL, a friend of Lance.
Hmm.
And so Frankie's career came to a halt, in my opinion, um, when an FOL took charge. And okay, maybe that's just, uh, I don't know. God wanted a different path. I don't know, but Frankie works hard at just he works announcing and commentating on cycling races mostly now. And so he's made a name for himself doing that. But yeah, so definitely took a big hit. And I know that there are people today who might not want to hire him because of us and what happened for whatever reason. But it is what it is.
Hmm. It seems strange. He's been vindicated, and he's definitely does great work. So he deserves all the best. But I am an FOB. I'm a friend of Betsy. So I'm really appreciative of this opportunity. I've been dying to talk about this stuff. I love. It's painful. I know some of these occurrences are
It's
for
not
you.
painful anymore. Honestly, it's not painful anymore. I mean, it's such a different space right now. It's not painful anymore.
It is because I mean you've been vindicated, and
Mhm.
I think you are widely seen as one of the first voices, one of the first. Maybe you and Greg were the very first, and Greg just kind of hinted. He didn't say it. You were saying it.
Mhm.
David Walsh and some of the others, but
Yeah.
it was just you for a
Well,
while.
it took
Um,
time. It took
yeah,
time,
yeah,
but JV did back us up in that New York Times piece, but he was anonymous. And he did it. And I don't blame him for being anonymous at that time because he would have lost everything
of
in
course.
what he was trying to do with running a clean team. So I don't blame him at all. I'm grateful, absolutely grateful that he had the moral courage to end up coming forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get into cycling?
I just always loved the bike. The movie Breaking Away had a lot to do with it.
Yeah,
Maybe,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I just loved it, and I would ride. I'd race occasionally when I was young, and then I got back into it about '99. I don't know Lance's winning tours. I
Mhm.
got back into it, and I was always a naturally strong cyclist. I wasn't like Frankie strong, but I was a very good sprinter, good going up hills,
Mhm.
like short hills. I was a puncher, I guess they call them. So yeah, I just loved it. And then I love the mental challenge of a 1 day race. We have races around here that are like kind of legendary around here. And I remember every one of the races, where I made my moves, why I couldn't win. And I just love the sport. And then I learned a lot from watching the professionals. My favorite rider was Oscar Freire. I loved him because he was so clever the way he would make his move.
Uh-huh.
And so I was more into the one day stuff. I hated Postal. Loved Frankie. I hated Postal. I always rooted against. I couldn't stay it. I mean, but only a 3 week guy. I loved Vinokourov. I loved him. I loved Mayo. Anyone that could stick it. The greatest day of my life is when they were beating up Lance on the Alpe d'Huez that day in 2003. When Tyler was hitting them and Vino was hitting them, and then even Mayo took off like Superman with his. I mean, yeah. So I just love the sport, and I have to admit, Lance ruined it for me. Ever since he came back, actually, ever since he retired, I stopped. I may watch a couple of tour stages, and I love Liège, Best on Liège, my favorite one-day race. So I'll watch that every year. But I mean, they ruined the sport for us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's sad.
yeah.
And what is that Cuba book in the back?
Oh, so it was it won the Pulitzer Prize for history. It's by Ada Ferrer, and I'm about maybe a quarter of the way through. And she's a tremendous historian. She's from Cuba. I forgot what year she came over. It's not just about the Cold War. It's about the whole history of Cuba. Why?
Oh,
Why it's not a state. It's more than just Castro, but it does
okay.
put.
Wait. My father-in-law likes to read. So it's called Cuba?
American History of Cuba.
Okay, and who's the author?
Ada Ferrer.
Alda or
Ada. Yeah.
Ada Ferrer.
She's wonderful. She's absolutely
Okay.
wonderful. Yeah, it's just a great read, and it just gives it's interesting that this island with all this resources, 60 miles from or 90 miles from Miami, never became a state, and it just kind of gives you a background of this little place. And I've always loved Cuban music and Cuban food.
Yeah.
Yeah, never been, but one day I
Well,
will.
you can go to Little Havana in Miami and get your fill. And if you go there, I will tell you where to get the best Cuban food, the best cortaditos, pastelitos, guayaba.
Yeah.
They are phenomenal. Phenomenal.
You have a wonderful accent.
Gracias.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, look, Betsy, this is great. I mean, I'm so appreciative of the opportunity. You're a wonderful woman. You're
Thank
tough.
you, Smug.
Yeah, tough as nails.
Oh, wait. I call him Smug because that was his handle for the forums where I met him.
That's right. And I am smug. I'm very smart out. Yeah, but you always are able to take my
I like it. I like the snark.
Yeah. So, well, anyway, look, this has been great. Thanks for doing it. And let's do a better job keeping in touch.
Sounds good. Oh,
Okay.
Go Blue.
Yeah, go Michigan. That's right. They're in the Final Four.
No, we're not. That's Michigan
State. No, but they lost.
No, Wait, did Michigan State make the Final Four?
They made the Final 8. They lost.
They did. They lost. Yeah.
Go Big Blue. My mom's Ohio State. She's from Columbus, but I'll forgive that. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No. Look, it's great seeing you, Betsy.
Okay, thanks, Mug. Talk to you later.
Yeah, you too. Great to see you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.